So I haven't done a extract brew in a really long time, probably over a year. So I thought I'd give you guys a rundown on how to do it if you're new. Maybe you got a Christmas present that's a homebrew kit. So today I'm going to show you how to make my Road Sodie IPA. It's a really drinkable, semi-sweet IPA. It's got a little honey malt, a little crystal malt, give it a little sweetness. It's got wheat DME. To give it a nice head, and you know, it's not over the top in IBUs, so it's not going to punch you in the face. It's one of my favorites, so happy to show you guys how to do it, and I hope you guys like it as much as I do, because I need to brew it again because it hasn't been on tap in a while and I miss it. So I'm going to use my Anvil kettle that's just pretty standard, 10-gallon kettle. You don't even need a 10-gallon kettle. You can use a 5-gallon kettle if you use the Palmer method, which I'll link to below. But I'm going to use that. I'm going to use my inversion chiller instead of my plate chiller. Inversion chillers are typically cheaper. I've had one sitting up in my shelving for over a year now, since I got the claw hammer, because they're slower, but you know, they're more accessible. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna heat up 5 gallons of RO water in my kettle, and in my little like soup pot, I'm gonna do 1 gallon of water, and I'm gonna steep my grains in there. So I'm gonna use some caramel malt and some honey malt just to give more body and more color to the extract brew. And how you do that is you basically steep it for 150 degrees for about 20 minutes, and you can do it. It's recommended you do it in 1.5 gallons to 2 gallons of water, but my pot's 1 gallon, so I'm going to do 1 gallon. You know, work with what you got. I've got my DME here. I like the Briess DME. And I've got some wheat DME and some pale ale DME, 6 pounds of pale ale, 1 pound of Bavarian wheat. That'll give us some better head on our beer. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw my 5 gallons of water into my kettle and my 1 gallon into my soup pot. You only need 6 gallons of water when you're doing extract because there's no grain absorption. So typically our grain would absorb around 1 gallon is what I usually end up with. So we're gonna save some water today. I'm not even gonna measure because I know this pot's around 1 gallon, and if it's a little low, I don't care. Just gonna leave enough room for my grain in there. Okay, so I'm gonna turn both of these on. I'm just heating up my water in my anvil so that as soon as this is done steeping, hopefully we can almost be at a boil. That would be ideal. Don't tell my husband, but I use both burners to get it to heat up quicker, even though it's slightly dangerous. Alrighty, 3 burners going. I'm gonna go mill my grain now for the steeping. If you're ordering your grain from like More Beer or whatever, or going to your local homebrew supply store, make sure you mill your steeping grain before you leave, or order it pre-milled, because you're not going to get anything out of it really if you just have the whole grain and you don't have a mill. So I have a mill here, which is really nice because I just keep bulk grain around. But yeah, definitely don't forget to do that because it'll not work. Okay, so for this beer, besides the dried extract, I'm going to use 8 ounces of caramel 10 and 4 ounces of honey malt. I really like using honey malt. It gives a nice sweetness to beer, and I like a sweeter IPA, kind of like along the lines of a juicy. But yeah, and it'll give it some nice color too. The light DME really doesn't give much color. So our SRM is going to be around 9 in this. And yeah, I'm going to just set my, my mill's already set to do a moderately fine crush. And then once we're all done, I'm going to stick it in this, like I use this as a hot bag for the most part, but we're going to steep it in this so that we don't have to worry about straining it and get the grain out or anything. Very easy. If I figure out how to do it, I'm gonna try to make this like a whole kit on Amazon so that you can just like go through a list, pull it all, and then make this beer. Cause want it to be easy as possible. Hopefully this like only takes me 3 hours altogether, which is insane because that's like half the time that I usually spend brewing. So yeah. So I'm just gonna put this in my steeping bag. All right, so we're just gonna put this in my 1 gallon pot of water that's around 150 degrees. You gotta keep it between 150 and 170. If you go above 170, you're gonna get tannins in it and it's gonna make your beer really astringent. My pot of water is it's about right at 150 actually. So I turned it down to low just to keep the temperature, and I'm just gonna drop in this bag really easily. You just don't want, don't let any grain get into the actual water. I'm gonna tie it off a little bit so that doesn't happen. It's kind of like making a tea for 20 minutes. All right, so we're gonna let that sit in there. And I'm gonna just set a timer on my stove for 20 minutes. And it looks like we're on track to hopefully in 20 minutes be at a boil. I'm gonna do my water addition measuring and add it to the pot now. I did RO water, so I'm gonna add some gypsum, calcium chloride, and Epsom salt to get my levels back up to, you know, having some kind of minerals in it at least. So once the kettle gets up to 150, I'm gonna add the DME, even though my specialty grains will probably not be done yet. But it's really hard to get DME to not clump if you add it like when it's super hot. Also, if you add it when it's boiling, it will like basically explode. I've actually done this when making yeast starters, and it's a terrible idea, so don't do it. So yeah, the only thing about adding DME is you've got to stir the crap out of it. It likes to clump even more than grain does, so that's the only issue I've ever had with it. Liquid malt extract, you have to use more technically, but obviously it doesn't clump because it's a syrup. But I don't know. I've had like people tell me that the like liquid malt extract ends up making a darker beer, which I don't know. I always use DME because it's easy to store. It really doesn't expire like LME does. So that's what I like. Okay, for water additions, let me first say you don't have to use water additions. It's probably after you go all grain is when you want to start really focusing on them. It's like if you're doing extract, you can make great beer with like whatever water you've got. The only thing I would suggest is make sure your water doesn't smell like chlorine a ton. You can get your local water reports for whatever city you're in usually just through the whatever place you pay for your water. So like if you're in a city like LA, for example, they put a ton of chloramine and chlorine in our water. And if it's just chlorine, you can, if you want to use tap water, you can just run your tap water the night before and let it sit out. Chloramine, that doesn't work for, so you might want to try Camden tablets. Or you can also, like, I use my Pure filter for when I do water. I still also do a Camden tablet, but I'm extremely paranoid. You can get a medicine-y flavor if you have chlorine in your water when you're brewing. And I went through a lot of beers where I couldn't figure out what was wrong with them. And I think our water actually had, like the composition of our water had just changed because we were going from like spring into summer, and I was making great beers for a while, and then everything went to crap. So just be mindful of your water. You don't have to screw with it like I do. If you want a hoppier profile, use a touch of gypsum and be done with it. It doesn't matter. I throw everything into Brewfather, and I always have like a stash of this stuff, so it's like may as well use it. All right, so now that I got that out of the way, we're gonna do 7.4 grams of calcium chloride. What kind of water? Okay, so I'm using the Hoppy NEPA water profile for this one, so it's gonna take a lot of calcium chloride because you want it to be a little sweeter if it's a NEPA. But if you like it like more West Coast style, you could like change. So like for what I'm gonna put 7.4 grams of calcium chloride. If you want it hoppier, you can put 7.4 grams of gypsum in it and it'll be fine. And I'm gonna do 2.6 grams of gypsum and 2.5 of Epsom salt. Also, I don't even have the points on here. I just go whole grams, so it's like whatever. You know, you're putting so little into so much liquid that it's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. Alrighty, so I'm gonna throw these in my kettle now. Okay, so while I was measuring out my water additions, it got to a little over 150, so I'm gonna throw these in. And then I'm just gonna throw the DME right in. Oh, that's kind of cool. It's like fizzing. So what you're gonna wanna do is, you can use a mash paddle or a slotted spoon. I always use a slotted spoon because I have not bought a mash paddle yet. I'm kind of still hoping that it's a Christmas present. All right, so. This can get messy, so be careful. You're gonna wanna stir while you add it, because otherwise it'll just become a huge glob of sugar. So this is my 1 pound of Bavarian wheat DME. And now I'm going to do my 6 pounds of pale ale DME. You can use pale ale for this. You can use like golden light. You can use light. There's a bunch of different kinds of dried malt extract that they make. And I just thought this would be nice, a pale ale malt, because I'm making an IPA, so. actually don't know if I've ever done a dried malt extract version of a beer in this kettle. Because once I got this kettle, I started doing brew in a bags with all grain. That's why I actually got this kettle. But I subsequently completely got rid of the old soup pot I was using. This is almost like, it's like way more fun than doing all grain just because it's so much quicker and so easy. But it can get expensive, so that's why I don't do it on a regular basis. Because like these bags of DME, they're significantly more expensive than your grain would be, especially because I buy mine in 5-pound sacks. Also, they're very messy. This one was split when I got it, so it got into a Ziploc bag. So we're just gonna mix this around until I'm sure there's no clumps in it, which there are a lot right now, but hopefully they will dissolve. And my timer for my greens just went off, so I'm gonna just toss that right in there too. Alright, so now with all my DME in here and my water, I've got like 7 gallons. So I'm gonna leave the lid off because I've got to get rid of some of that water. My batch is only supposed to be 5 gallons. I'd be cool with 5.5 going into the fermenter for trub loss. But 7's way too much. So hopefully we get a good boil off. Hey guys, when I got into editing this video, I realized it was going to be like over half an hour, closer to like 40 minutes. So I decided to split it up. So for this one, you got to see kind of the pre-boil prep, and then the next video is going to be the boil, and I'm also going to do the dry hop and a review in it. So I hope you watch the next one as well, and if not, and if you want to brew it today, the recipe is below, as well as the kit to buy all the ingredients on Amazon. Thanks!